The Committee on Natural Resources will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recess of the committee at any time. The committee is meeting today to hear testimony from the Secretary of the Department of the Interior, the Honorable Deb Haaland, on the Department of Interior's fiscal year 2025 budget request. Under Committee Rule 4F, any oral opening statements at hearings are limited to the chairman and the ranking minority member. I therefore ask unanimous consent that all other members' opening statements be made part of the hearing record if they are submitted in accordance with Committee Rule 3.0. Without objection, so ordered. Good morning and welcome, Secretary Haaland. We appreciate having you back in the committee, and I'm looking forward to hearing your testimony and the questions from our members today. While some things have changed since you last appeared before us, much has remained the same. I know our members and I have many questions for you on DOI's policy making over the past 12 months and the way your agency continues to ignore local voices in pursuit of vague, undefined goals dictated by a radical agenda. The consequences of DOI's actions are deeply felt in areas that have relied on multiple use of public lands for generations. These communities have been abruptly destabilized by decisions from D.C. bureaucrats who think they know what's best. Despite the administration's inclusive claims, their actions are painting a different picture, one that is causing real harm to our fellow Americans. DOI's games are putting America in jeopardy. With so many questionable actions from DOI, it is impossible to name them all, so instead I'll take them one jeopardy category at a time. The first is faux conservation, a category of cleverly named actions that in reality restrict land access to further an extreme environmental agenda. Leading off, the Bureau of Land Management's final rule, which when first proposed drew the ire of Western governors, members of Congress, and thousands of Americans. It's a danger to the land America relies on to feed and fuel our economy and a blatant disregard for input. The answer to that clue is, what is BLM's public lands rule? Not to be outdone, the next category is rogue rules, and here's your clue. This rulemaking will impose new fees and regulatory burdens on Americans' energy producers, have devastating effects on small businesses, and increase energy costs for consumers. The answer is, what is BLM's onshore leasing rule? Or how about our next category, where's my energy? I'll give you several clues, starting with the latest devastating sanctions on Alaska. The decision to limit energy development in the NPRA ignored the blatant concerns of indigenous communities, residents of Alaska, and Alaska's entire congressional delegation. The Biden administration also effectively shuttered mineral development in Alaska by blocking the access road to the Ambler Mining District. Lest President Biden forgets, these are the same minerals needed for his own renewable energy goals, not to mention the items we depend on for our daily use. When it comes to these actions and this clue, the answer is clear, and that is, what are Biden's attacks on Alaska's right to produce energy and minerals? I've been a little tongue-in-cheek with my examples, but the jeopardy posed by the actions of the Department of Interior under the Biden administration is all too real. Each decision I outline came out of just the past 2 weeks. Just the past 2 weeks, those three decisions and three rules, which seem more like lawmaking that Congress should be doing instead of rulemaking by the administration. There's not enough time for me to outline the attack after attack from this administration since day one. At the same time, the Biden border crisis has spread to every community across America. I've spent time in New York City, of all places, seeing how National Park Service lands are now home to camps for migrants. This rules for thee and not for me situation shows DOI is choosing to prioritize the needs of migrants above the safety and well-being of American communities and our treasured public lands. This administration treats policymaking as a game, using American communities as political pawns. Unfortunately, decisions have real consequences. We're talking about people's livelihoods, real money, not game show winnings. In contrast, Republicans have advanced policies that promote a healthy environment and a healthy economy. These are not mutually exclusive goals. In fact, they go hand in hand. Our solutions provide access to American resources, advance conservation, environmentally friendly ideals and put local leaders in the driver's seat instead of D.C. bureaucrats. Secretary Haaland, I urge you to give all communities a seat at the table, not just the ones that fit your narrative. End this pattern of disrespect and disregard and work with us to enact meaningful change that works for everyone. I yield back my time and now recognize the ranking minority leader, Ms. Kamlager-Dove, for any statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and a warm welcome to you, Secretary Haaland. I know that you served on this auspicious committee before you became secretary. I also know that Ranking Member Grijalva is disappointed that he can't be here to welcome you himself, but I think I speak on behalf of all of my colleagues in saying that we are glad he is taking time to fully recover. Madam Secretary, you are here today as we've had an unusually warm week in D.C., and this is coming from someone from Los Angeles. I can't help but think of it as a subtle forewarning for the summer that lies ahead. Last year, we had the hottest summer on record, and many experts think there's a good chance we'll break that record again this time. But even if we only come close, it doesn't change the fact that our oceans, the planet's proverbial canary in the coal mine, are hotter than they have ever been in recorded history, and not by a small margin. The climate crisis is clearly here, and it is not shy. It is making its presence known in nearly every aspect of our lives. In fact, I think the only place where you can potentially forget that we're in the midst of the most existential crisis of our time may be in this very hearing room, where my Republican colleagues have yet to bring up a single bill that meaningfully addresses the climate crisis, not a single one. But gratefully, House Republicans are not the sole proprietors of our U.S. governing body. We are deeply fortunate to have the leadership of President Biden and Secretary Haaland, which is, shall we say, a bit more rooted in the reality that we're facing. When President Biden took office, he made a pledge to close the book on the climate denialism of the previous administration and restore the United States' climate leadership both here and abroad. And he, with your help, of course, Madam Secretary, has done just that. In fact, the Biden administration has accomplished more on climate than any other administration in history. Capitalizing on the historic investments in climate and clean energy that Democrats passed through the Inflation Reduction Act, the Biden administration is deploying clean energy across the country, which has garnered billions in private sector investment and created over 270,000 good-paying jobs with ribbon-cutting ceremonies across the country that Republicans attend as well as Democrats. At the Interior Department specifically, Secretary Haaland has overseen the recent release of several new rules that represent the bold action we need to transform the management of our public lands for a cleaner energy future. The Bureau of Land Management's new public lands rule, for example, finally puts conservation on equal footing with other uses of our public lands, like oil and gas drilling, grazing, and timber. Other newly finalized rules put long overdue fiscal reforms in place to make sure American taxpayers are finally getting a fairer return when big oil drills on our public lands and waters. Another rule builds on the success of the Biden administration, which has already surpassed its goal of permitting 25 gigawatts of renewable energy by boosting more solar and wind energy development on our public lands. Together, these new rules are transforming our energy economy status quo from one that has enabled the fossil fuel industry's desecration of our public lands, nearby communities, and global climate to one that is safer, cleaner, more sustainable, and more just. This is the kind of leadership the vast majority of Americans who want to see us do more on climate are asking for. But of course, it's decidedly not the kind of leadership that polluters want. We've seen them here week after week at the invitation of my Republican colleagues, pining and longing for the days of the previous administration, which rolled back more than 100 environmental rules so they could turn a bigger, quicker, and dirtier profit, all at the expense of the American people. So I want to thank you again, Secretary Haaland, because while it's clear that my colleagues across the aisle are all too willing to do the bidding of their favorite polluter pals, you have shown in no uncertain terms that our public lands and waters are no longer a breeding ground for corporate polluter greed. If industry wants to do business here, they will do it safely, they will do it responsibly, they will listen to nearby communities and tribes, and they will clean up their mess. This is the kind of leadership that will build a cleaner, safer, more affordable energy future with good paying jobs that will protect our beautiful public lands and special places for generations to come, and that will listen to the millions of Americans who've been overburdened by pollution for far too long. This is what puts American people first, your leadership. So thank you again for being here, Madam Secretary, and we look forward to your continued leadership. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Gentlelady yields back. Now we'll introduce our witness. Our witness today is the Honorable Deb Haaland, and she is the Secretary of the Department of Interior, confirmed by the Senate on March 15, 2021. She is accompanied by Acting Deputy Secretary Laura Daniel Davis and Director of the Office of Budget Defense, Denise Flanagan. Let me remind the witness that under committee rules, you must limit your oral statement to 5 minutes, but your entire statement will appear in the hearing record. To begin your testimony, please press the talk button on the microphone. Having been a veteran of the committee, you get the drill. As you know, we use timing lights. When you begin, the light will turn green. When you have 1 minute left, the light will turn yellow. And at the end of 5 minutes, the light will turn red, and I will ask you to please complete your statement. I will also allow, after the testimony, then we'll have member questioning. And I now recognize Secretary Haaland for 5 minutes.